we actually can see groups in our society that are often linked to imposter syndrome by race, gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, family dynamics. These groups often subjects them to persistent negative stereotyping. We find that how people are treated by self-relevant others is an important precursor to imposter feelings. Our everyday interactions are laced with important social evaluative cues. Perfectionism gets in the way of leading a successful and happy life. You can become obsessed with being in control of every aspect of your life.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Nina, and I'll be the moderator for today. Now, to kick things off, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Brian S. Quinn. Brian S. Quinn, Esquire, is a licensed attorney in Pennsylvania who currently serves as the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers of Pennsylvania, Incorporated, a lawyer's assistance program established in 1988 for the purpose of helping lawyers, judges, and law students recover from alcoholism, drug addiction, and mental health disorders. The webinar that you're about to watch will be approximately 1 hour, and Brian will be taking questions from the audience, time permitting, once the presentation is complete. So if you have a question that you'd like us to address after the presentation, you can always submit it by clicking the Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen and sending it in there. Now, without further ado, here is Brian to discuss I Don't Belong, Imposter Syndrome in the Legal Profession.
Thank you so much, Nina. I don't belong. And we're going to be talking about a topic that seems to get a lot of attention. But then again, it doesn't. And I'm going to tell you why it doesn't get the right kind of attention. And I think you might, who knows? You might feel that you have experienced this. You may be surprised at some of the statistics I'm going to share with you today. But it is something that needs to be discussed because, and what I want to talk about first are lawyers' assistance programs. We call ours Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, LCL, but most of them go by LAP, Lawyer Assistance Program. We all share a common mission to the extent that we try to provide a caring peer assistance program, as Nina pointed out to you. If there's 50 states, there's 50 different programs. We offer some of the same services. We don't always do them in the same manner. One of the things that you have access to is a link to the American Bar Association's Directory of Lawyer Assistance Programs. I always urge people in the beginning of any of my presentations to consult with your local state lawyers assistance program to determine what services they offer and how they offer them. Are they restricted to simply licensed attorneys? Many states, Pennsylvania, for example, offers all of our services to any member of the lawyer's family, and I mean the extended family, not just the household members. Anyone who's related to a Pennsylvania lawyer by blood or marriage qualifies for our free confidential services. Maybe your state does the same thing, but you've got to check. Confidential helplines are operated in a different manner. The most important difference that you might find is whether or not there are clinicians on staff or whether they make referrals. We make referrals to licensed healthcare professionals. And if someone can't afford an evaluation for a substance use or a mental health disorder, we pay for it. We protect your identity, we protect your information, but all lawyer assistance programs don't operate the same. One thing we have in common is that we do not disclose information. I always want you to check the rules of professional conduct in your state, especially if it relates to some sort of impairment that's the result of a substance use disorder, be it alcohol or another substance, or a mental health problem. Because once again, there are rules of professional conduct that have to do with the duty to report misconduct. And many lawyers do not call and do not reach out to the confidential helplines, even anonymously. They're afraid that somehow information will be shared, their IP addresses, their phone numbers will come up on some sort of a caller ID. We don't use those kinds of things because we don't really care why they call us. We care, we don't care who calls us. We care why they call us, what the problem is. Be familiar with whether your state has a rule that's similar. Maybe they've adopted the ABA model rules in their entirety, like many states have. But Rule 8.3C is the key, because that's the rule that protects any information gained by a lawyer or judge while participating in an approved state lawyer assistance program. Very important. That means that even ethical violations, if they are revealed during any communication with your state's lawyers assistance program, the rules of conduct specifically prohibit the lawyers assistance program from disclosing that information. It's a one-way street. If someone refers a person to us, perhaps the disciplinary board or authorities in your state may have referred it. It's a one-way street, as I said. We get the name of the attorney. What happens after that stays with us. It doesn't go back to the referring source, especially if it's a disciplinary source. So that exception should encourage lawyers and judges. That's why it was passed. That's why it was made part of the rules of professional conduct, because we're dealing with chronic and progressive diseases that simply don't go away. And the most important thing that I can tell you to begin this program is that mental health issues have now taken the forefront. Many people associate lawyers assistance programs with lawyers who have a drinking problem, quote unquote. And we help many people who have a drinking problem, but you'd be surprised, I'm sure, if I told you that for example, I'll use my own state, Pennsylvania. 20% of our callers call with a primary presenting issue that's alcohol. 74% call with a primary presenting issue that's related to their mental health. Now, there may be a co-occurring disorder that involves a misuse of a substance, but not the primary reason that someone is diagnosed with a mental health condition or a substance use condition. Depression is 28% of all attorneys, according to the Hazel and Betty Ford ABA study that was done 10 years ago. Many of you may be in a state that has recently released or made available, I should say, the information to the same individual who did this study 10 years ago is doing an updated study. His name is Patrick Krill. He's a lawyer and a certified drug and alcohol counselor, and he's devoted his entire career now to lawyer wellness and lawyer well-being. And Krill has just completed the question and answer portion of his newest study, and it's going to be coming out in early 2026. But these are the statistics that we deal with now, and you can see that there are high prevalence rates. 7% of the population, the general population in this country, suffers from clinical depression. 28% of attorneys. Alcohol is the same, much higher rates. But I want to get into one of the problems that we seem to be hearing a lot about, but many people don't want to talk about it. And I'm going to tell you why. What is this thing called imposter syndrome? It was first described by two psychologists, Suzanne Imes and Pauline Rose Clance, back in 1978, who referred to it as the imposter phenomenon, as something which occurs among high achievers who are unable to internalize and accept their success. They often attribute their accomplishments to luck rather than to ability, and fear that others will eventually unmask them as a fraud. So despite having adequate external evidence of their accomplishments, People with imposter syndrome remain convinced that they don't deserve the success that they have. So while Clance and Imes coined the term imposter phenomenon, it has now become more typically referred to as the imposter syndrome. So, what do you think these people have in common? Well, given the title and the topic of today's program, you might have already guessed. Michelle Obama, Einstein, Tom Hanks, Justice Sonia Sotomayor. We could put Lady Gaga, Serena Williams, former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz. What do they all have in common? Well, they are among the many highly successful, bright, accomplished, well-known people who have suffered from imposter syndrome. So just how common is it? Studies are now showing us that approximately 74% of lawyers experience imposter syndrome, and it appears to be even higher among junior attorneys with a rate of 83%. Now, that's a pretty high percentage rate for lawyers, especially young lawyers. The causes, well, there's where we have quite a divergence of opinion. Some believe that personality traits largely drive imposter syndrome. Those who experience it struggle with self-efficacy, perfectionism, and neuroticism. Competitive environments can also lay the groundwork. And we know that the law can be a competitive environment, but sometimes it's happened many years before people ever go to law school. Many people who go on to develop feelings of imposterism faced intense pressure about academic achievement from their parents in childhood. Others who have studied imposter syndrome believe that depicting the phenomenon as a syndrome in and of itself gives the impression that individuals who experience it are patients, which is problematic because it implies a medical model of dysfunction within the individual. And there is no medical criteria for imposter syndrome. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM, used by medical professionals to diagnose and treat mental health disorders, addictive disorders, it's not in there. You're not going to find any reference to imposter syndrome. It's not a medical condition. So because of this, if you use an individualistic, person-based approach to dealing with the imposter phenomenon, many of the proposed solutions and strategies focus on trying to fix people, fix the individual who suffers with it. And solutions in that regard typically involve clinical therapy, coaching, confidence training, and appeals to just push forward and overcome one's own imposter syndrome. Others feel at best the efficacy of those solutions are likely to fall short of its full potential. Why? In part because such an approach misses an important piece of the puzzle: how the social context may shape one's tendency to feel like an imposter. And at worst, such an individual-focused solution can reinforce notions of victim blaming, whereby others perceive that the problem is with the individual. And so it's the individual who's ultimately responsible for fixing their own situation. Others believe it's our very culture that reinforces what's not a syndrome as much as a phenomenon, and that we've yet to give the social roots of this phenomenon the attention it deserves. And the legal profession culture is not an exception. But in general, how society and culture at large, how organizations and other institutions like the legal profession, and perhaps more importantly, how everyday interactions and interpersonal relationships may play critical roles in shaping imposter feelings. So we've got to look much more closely at the causes from a different perspective. And when we do that, we actually can see groups in our society that are often linked to imposter syndrome by race, gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, family dynamics. These groups, or perhaps it's more appropriate to say grouping people in this manner often subjects them to persistent negative stereotyping. An individual's position in the social hierarchy can play an important role in shaping his or her imposter feelings, including how the specific challenges and stressors that accompany a lower societal position can make one feel like an imposter. Women were, and despite great strides, still are often depicted as lacking leadership qualities in the legal profession. They are stereotypically perceived as communal and warm, while men somehow are portrayed as having a more natural fit for leadership positions. So in response to these gender and leader stereotypes, research suggests that a woman may feel insecure and out of place if she were to achieve such a leadership position, as these pervasive stereotypes have consistently signaled, both directly and indirectly, that she wouldn't be a fit for such a position. And in the law, that's borne out by the fact that women continue to be underrepresented in private practice, especially when it comes to attaining leadership roles. There are more women in law school than ever before, but men still seem to lead the pack when it comes to private practice. There is some good, well, at least I'll call it better news right now. In a major shift, new figures show that more women were employed as associates in U.S. law firms than men in 2023. It rose to 50.3% of associates in U.S. law firms in 2023 were women. First time ever. There are more women in law school, and have been since 2016, more women than men. But men still lead the pack, as I said, when it comes to private practice, making up about 2/3 of attorneys in this sector of the profession. Within those private practice firms, only 27.3% of equity partners are women. That means that the percentage of women associates is nearly double that of partners. Why? Well, there's varied opinions on that issue. Experts feel it's the result of bias, lack of inclusion, lack of mentorship at firms, and uneven caregiving demands. Some people felt that during the coronavirus crisis, when women working at law firms were disproportionately affected by the intensified struggle of balancing a law career with caregiving responsibilities, had a major impact. 42% of attorneys who left their firms in 2020 were women, and women of color made up 13% of those departures. Likewise, ethnic minorities are stereotyped negatively, and in response to those negative portrayals of their group, many ethnic minority law students tell us, and new associates as well, that they're likely to worry about their admission to, for instance, a prestigious law school or firm, that it's the outcome of luck instead of something that they actually deserve. Research examining imposter feelings among ethnic minority students indeed showed that students who reported being racially discriminated against were more likely to feel like imposters. So what does that suggest to us? It suggests, in my opinion, at a societal level, the group that someone belongs to and the portrayal of that group in society plays an important role in triggering an individual's imposter feelings. And in the law firm setting, men, and to a larger extent women of color, may lack role models and may even be paid less for the work that they do, according to research. That lack of representation and lower compensation will elicit doubts about one's suitability for those occupations and positions. And that same line of research there suggests that in such a law firm environment, women and ethnic minority group members may question their place within those firms, traditionally occupied by white males, thereby increasing their susceptibility to feel like imposters when in those institutions or firms. Put another way, feeling like an imposter can exacerbate the impact of discrimination. Therefore, what do we find here? We find that how people are treated by self-relevant others is an important precursor to imposter feelings. Our everyday interactions are laced with important social evaluative cues, conveying whether others see someone as a person of value, a person of worth, and ultimately guide that individual's appraisals of their own self-worth, shaping their self-esteem and a sense of being worthy or deserving of their place within that group. In traditionally white, male-dominated professions like the law, female and ethnic minority employees are often perceived and treated differently. Maybe they're less sought out for advice. Maybe they're not always included in work-related discussions. These subtle and not even so subtle everyday oversights communicate that these employees' ideas, knowledge, insights are valued less than that of other employees, which can in turn perpetuate issues of confidence. More importantly, the combination of discrimination and imposter syndrome can result in higher stress levels, more negative mental health consequences. So, it is key to consider the quality of treatment people receive from others, particularly the types of treatment that communicate a sense of value, worth, and fitness. Individuals may very well feel like imposters when they're treated in ways to suggest that they are. Similarly, such imposter feelings can also be mitigated when these individuals are treated by others as a person of value and worth. So I'll probably return to this aspect of imposter syndrome, but I want to go through some of the other types of people that struggle with imposter syndrome. Maybe these are the numbers that I just mentioned before. The partners percentage, you have access to all of this. But before I go past this, in 2024, percentage of non-white associates is 30%. Non-white partners, 12%. Women of color, only 5% of all partners in U.S. firms. There it is. There are the numbers. Gender bias, harmful stereotypes persist in the profession. Certain law firms, as I said, have their internal structural issues that can contribute to the problem. So, what I want to do now is look at some of these other types of people that struggle with imposter syndrome. Maybe you recognize yourself. The perfectionist, the super person, the natural genius, the soloist, the expert. These were created by a very well-known authority on the subject, Dr. Valerie Young, who came up with these categorizations, or subgroups, we'll call them. And here's the one that gets the most attention among lawyers, without a doubt. I can do a whole presentation, a whole CLE on perfectionism in the legal profession. And it's many people think that perfectionism and imposter syndrome go hand in hand, and perfectionism is almost a disease of the legal profession. Perfectionists set excessively high goals for themselves. When they fail to reach a goal, they experience major self-doubt and worry about measuring up. And whether they realize it or not, and this may be breaking news, so hold on to your seats. Lawyers have control issues. Yes, you've never heard that before. Tongue in cheek, of course. Yes. Whether we like it or not, or realize it or not, lawyers can be control freaks, feeling like if they want something done right, they have to do it themselves. These so-called imposters think that every task they tackle has to be done perfectly. They rarely ask for help. That perfectionism can lead to two typical responses, and you may be very surprised at the first one. Procrastination, putting off assignments out of fear that he or she won't be able to complete the task to the necessary high standards that they set. Or he or she may over-prepare, spending much more time on a task than is really necessary. And of course, that can cause all sorts of problems. When you have billing issues and you have to account for for all the hours that you worked, and maybe you end up not getting paid for some of those hours because you were obsessed. It is a form of obsession with doing things perfectly. Some, as I say, believe it's a disease of the legal profession. We tend to be perfectionists, setting impossible standards for ourselves in a sense that nothing is ever good enough. We're trained to be on the constant lookout for problems. We see ourselves as problem solvers. We're responsible for taking care of our clients. We're saying, yes, of course, I'll help you. I'll help you. I'll take care of that. I'll take care of this. We are the go-to people. Except when it comes to that person that looks at us in the mirror every day. Yeah. Why do we say no to that person? What am I going to do for you today? I'll get to that a little later. But remember what I told you about perfectionism and problem solvers who can suddenly transition from their problem solving role into being nothing more than problem collectors, collecting other people's problems all the time. Sometimes the true urgency of these problems becomes exaggerated. And when lawyers feel that way, they don't ask for help. They don't want to appear weak. They face constant deadlines set by other people, courts, other parties, in cases, clients over which they have very little control. And lawyers don't deal well with that. The law demands acute attention to detail. I'm not suggesting that it does not. I'm not suggesting that we not do our work well, but excellence does not have to equal perfection. Yes, the price for making a mistake can be, depending on the type of work you do, millions of dollars or prison sentence or loss of custody of a child for the matrimonial lawyer. We are all served well as lawyers, professionally, by some form of perfectionism. But if it's the type of perfectionism that make you feel like your work is never good enough, that's a major risk factor for burnout. And you need to look really closely at your own beliefs. If those core beliefs include ideas that prevent you from admitting that there's a problem or from seeking help, you may want to rethink it. Do you feel like your work has to be 100% perfect 100% of the time? Truth is, there's never going to be a perfect time, and your work is never going to be 100% flawless. Sorry. The sooner you're able to accept that, the better off you'll be. Not all perfectionism is bad. As you can see, there's something called adaptive perfectionism. Healthy, normal, relates to an intense effort to put forth that's put forth to achieve a goal. The adaptively perfectionistic person can set a high, but a realistic standard. And boy, that word realistic really becomes important. A realistic standard, and not resort to harsh self-criticism. Just it goes over and above what we usually would feel when things don't go right. That's the person who really starts to suffer from maladaptive perfectionism, where perfectionism gets in the way of leading a successful and happy life. You become obsessed with being in control of every aspect of your life. And when it becomes clear that that's not possible, the reaction is extreme, self-critical. People with maladaptive perfectionism tend to be highly self-conscious and develop negative attitudes when things don't go as planned. The maladaptive perfectionist is often linked, maladaptive perfectionism is often linked to psychological disorders such as depression and anxiety. And that's why I started the program off by discussing the high prevalence rates that we already have in our profession for depression and anxiety. The same person, Patrick Krill, who did that study for the ABA 10 years ago and who is currently doing another study, as I mentioned, also studied the connection between maladaptive perfectionism and stress disorders. And there's a strong connection between people who have this out of control perfectionism and people who suffer with distress. And untreated Distress becomes burnout. That's the cycle. Stress, and a lot of stress is normal and actually can help us be creative and productive problem solvers, which we love to do. But too many things that are happening, not enough time to do what I have on my plate. I have this huge schedule. I've got all these things on my list. Can't get them all done. How does that make us feel? Always wanting to please other people, criticizing behavior of others, procrastinating on important tasks because you need that big period of time to get it done perfectly. Black or white, all or nothing. In control. Taking everything personally, becoming defensive. Guilt and shame for what you perceive to be failures. That's the perfectionism form of imposter syndrome. The super person, the Superman and Superwoman, well, people who experience this phenomenon are convinced they're the phonies and everybody else is the real deal, especially among their colleagues. They push themselves to work harder and harder to measure up. It's just a false cover-up for their insecurity, and their work overload may harm not only their own mental health, but their relationships with others. If you're not sure it applies to you, are you the one that has to be the last to leave the office and the first there in the morning, even past the point that when you've completed that day's necessary work? Do you get stressed when you're not working? In other words, downtime is bad time. You always have to have something to be doing. Yes, does it sound like workaholism? It sure does. Have you let your hobbies and passions fall by the wayside? Sacrificed the work? Maybe you feel like you haven't really earned your title despite those numerous degrees and achievements. So you press yourself to prove that worth. Or maybe you're a natural genius. There he is again. Dr. Young says that people with this competence type believe that they need to be a natural genius, and they judge their competence based upon the ease and speed as opposed to their efforts. In other words, if it takes them a long time to master something, they feel guilt and shame. Maybe you're used to excelling without much effort. Maybe you're the one with the track record of getting straight A's and all gold stars. Were you told by your family, your parents, that you were the smart one in the family? You dislike the idea of having a mentor because you can handle things on your own? More importantly, when things don't go as planned, does your confidence crash because you're not performing well, and then it provokes a feeling of shame? Maybe you're a natural genius type. The soloists, on the other hand, they're the ones who say this: sorry, only phonies ask for help. I don't need anybody's help. No thanks. Nope, not for me. Lastly, the expert. Ah, yes. They measure their competence based on what and how much they know or can do. Believing they'll never know enough, they fear being exposed as inexperienced or unknowledgeable. They bulk up their skill set over and above. Sure, there's always more to learn. Keep you competitive. Help you make strides professionally. But when you take it too far, the tendency to endlessly seek out more information before you even start a task, you have to know everything there is about it. Maybe that's another form of procrastination. So there's another form of a much less discussed form of imposter syndrome. It's called trauma-centered imposter syndrome. For individuals experiencing trauma-centered imposter syndrome, there are two main differences compared with the more general type. General imposter syndrome is typically related to just one aspect of your life. Trauma-centered imposter syndrome tends to impact all areas of your life, leaving you feeling inadequate all the time. And I know a lot about trauma-centered imposter syndrome because it happened to me. All I ever wanted to do was be a lawyer. Since I was probably 11 or 12-year-old kid. And I come from a middle-class family in suburban Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where no one but me went beyond high school. 3 brothers, mom, dad, of the 6 of us. I'm the only one who went on to college, let alone on to law school. Lived at home, worked. While I was in college, I was a commuter to a nearby university. And then I was successful enough to be accepted to law school. Not a perfectionist, not a straight A student. That's not my story. My story is one that's strictly related to trauma. And what happened was this. And it happened a long time ago. First of all, I was very successful in finding a job while I was in law school. It happened by coincidence. I met a man who was campaigning for political office, out shaking hands one day in the community. And I was on my way to work. He stopped me and introduced himself, and he asked me what I was doing. I said, just graduated from college. I'm getting ready to start law school. He said, "Hey, that's great. I'm a lawyer. I have an office here in town. Why don't you come and see me after you've been in school for a few months?" And I did. And after a conversation, he said, "How'd you like to be my law clerk?" And I was thrilled. A successful, well-known man, lawyer, person in our community asked me to come to work for him as his law clerk. So I worked there for 2.5 years until I graduated from law school. I took the Pennsylvania bar exam after I graduated, and I remember the day well. And keep in mind, folks, that what I'm about to tell you happened 52 years ago. It's a long time ago. I graduated from law school in 1973. And I can remember everything that happened like it was yesterday. Like it was this morning, actually. That's how much I can remember. And I was so happy. I got that information that I passed the bar exam. My mentor said to me, "I have a big case in court tomorrow. Come to the courthouse, sit with our client at counsel table. I'll introduce you all the lawyers and judges who will be in the courthouse as my soon-to-be new associate once you're admitted to the bar." And I was there the next day. I sat with his client. I was watching my mentor present his case, and 5 minutes into his presentation, he fell to the floor of the courtroom, dead from a heart attack. He was 43 years old. I watched him die. I can still remember his face, his body. He took his last breath. I watched it all. I remember them putting his body in a body bag and removing it from the courtroom. And I was there. I held his car keys and his wallet and his briefcase. And there I was, like, just lost. I physically felt like I was spinning. And people said, "Brian, you take all these things and we have to figure out a way to notify his family." And it was just a blur. And I spoke to his wife later that day. He had 3 little kids, all 3 under the age of 11 or 12. And she said to me, "Brian, you need to take over George's law practice." That's what he would have wanted. All I had was a piece of paper that had come in the mail the day before that said I passed the Pennsylvania bar exam. I wasn't even admitted to practice law yet. The day after his funeral, I had to get my law license. A man that I didn't even know. I didn't go to a ceremonial admission in a courtroom. I went to a clerk's office. It was a weekend. He died on a Friday. On Monday or Tuesday, his funeral. The next day I was in the clerk's office signing papers, and I had a law license. I went back and I went into his office, sat behind his desk in his chair, and suddenly realized that the people that were coming in there were there to see me. And I thought, I hope these people don't think I know what I'm doing. I couldn't say that, but that's how I felt. Like I didn't belong. That's how I came up with the title. And I felt that way over and over. And even if I was successful in a manner, I would never feel that I was really the person that they wanted, that they really had wanted my mentor. And somehow they were stuck with me. I wasn't a real lawyer, in other words. And if someone said to me, Mr. Quinn, I need you to take my case, I have to be in court, it would trigger these feelings that I cannot describe how intense the fear, the panic that I felt when people would talk to me about going into a courtroom again. And I had to do it. I had to go into the same courtroom where he died. It was the main courtroom in the courthouse where I practiced law, in the town that I practiced law, the county in Pennsylvania where I practiced. Walking toward a courthouse, any courthouse, walking into a courtroom always brought on these feelings of fear, anxiety. I was paralyzed, and I couldn't talk about it. I didn't want to tell anybody because I thought, what will they think of me? And I couldn't make these feelings go away. And I tried to describe them to people that I felt as if I were going to die. That's how intense it was. And they'd say, just calm down. You have to calm your nerves down. You're just nervous. You're just scared because you're new. No, it's worse than that. It's worse. I'm struggling every day. And somebody said to me, look, Brian, just have a drink. I self-medicated. But people didn't understand the intensity, and I would drink. It started off after work. Then it was every day after work. Then it was weekends and every day. It was 7 days a week. Then it was in the afternoons. And then it was in the mornings before I went to the office. And I kept it a secret. And it went on and on. But I made sure everything looked good on the outside. I looked successful. I got nice clothes. I got a nice car. I found a house to live in. I had a family. I had everything that people thought successful lawyers had, but they couldn't see inside of me. They couldn't see the pain that I lived with every day. That was so real that it paralyzed me. And the only way I could make it go away was alcohol and then drugs. And it went on and on. And yeah, my wife found out that I was doing all these things, and she said, you've got to stop. And you know what I stopped doing? I stopped living with my wife and my children. I left because I couldn't stop. I thought I'll stop when I want to. And then I couldn't stop. And then I just didn't want to. And I didn't care. And my whole life was hiding. It was like having 3 jobs. One, Brian the lawyer. One, Brian the alcoholic and drug addict. And one, the Brian who just spent his life hiding things and walking the tightrope and being worried about what if this person finds out or that person finds out. And I had a very successful outside story. I used to laugh and tell people I live in a 2-story house. The story that you see on the outside and the story that goes on the inside, because nobody could see what was going on in my life in real time, only what I would allow them to see. And I got worse and worse. And I started to commit ethical and literally criminal acts. I stole money from clients. I got arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol in 2 or 3 different states. And I tried to keep it all secret. I lost my house to foreclosure. I lost my office building to foreclosure. Gone. And I couldn't make these feelings go away that I did belong. And they just drove me to that. And I didn't ask for help. By definition, most people with imposter feelings suffer in silence. Most people don't talk about it because part of the experience is that they're afraid that they're going to be found out, that somebody will find out what I'm really like and that I don't belong. Until someone finally reached out to me, someone that knew me for a long time. Yes, I told you I was arrested. I went to jail. I lost my law license for 5.5 years. I told you I became a lawyer in 1973. My license was lost from 2010 to 2015. So that's how many years I was impacted by these feelings. But lawyers will tell us, no, we don't have that kind of a problem where in our organization, our firm. The data tells a different story. Everybody doesn't go through what I went through. Everybody doesn't go through the distress and the anxiety and the panic disorder that I went through. It's the distress in our life. I told you some stress is healthy and normal, but these things can come upon us. They don't all happen like that. And it really didn't even happen to me like that. Not the distress. It was these feelings that I couldn't describe. And I was too ashamed and embarrassed to ask for help. As I told you, untreated distress will lead to burnout. This feeling of constant anxiety, this feeling of being overwhelmed, being pessimistic, always feeling inadequate. You can't perform any of your tasks, folks. You can't concentrate. You can't sleep. You've got to do something about what happens if you don't ask for help. Senior leaders, mentors, practice groups need to be aware of what imposter syndrome is, why they should care about it, how to identify common signs and symptoms of it in their mentees, peers, teams, whatever you environment you work in. For those of you who work like I did as a sole practitioner, you've got to be able to say, yes, maybe I do need to talk to somebody. We've got to create a culture that reduces fear instead of feeding fear. That means that senior attorneys need to open up to younger lawyers about their own self-doubt. Maybe they still suffer from it. As I said, this went well into my career. And I had a career that took me to places like I got involved in politics like my mentor was. That was one of the things people said about Brian, just, you need something else to keep you busy and think about other things, helping other people. It took me to meeting congressmen, senators, going to the White House in Washington, knowing cabinet member personally. But I was impaired and I kept it a secret. So we can't create a culture that always involves this self-doubt. We have to neutralize the stigma and create a culture of connection and compassion in which attorneys feel safe sharing their thoughts, seeking support, surmounting these struggles. We've got to normalize it and send the message that the syndrome and success are not mutually exclusive. There are many people, as I said, that are very successful that have suffered from it. Why can't we just say, well, if the superstar lawyer has imposter syndrome, maybe my imposter syndrome doesn't mean I'm a failure, because they certainly aren't failures. Unfortunately, we can operate on a fixed mindset, viewing failure as defining us, instead of viewing it as a temporary situation that can actually be used by us as a stepping stone to future success. But this mindset pervades our profession, ladies and gentlemen. It contributes to lawyers' unreasonably high expectations of themselves and others, and to this suffocating pressure that they experience, and perhaps more importantly, perpetuate. So, as I said, no matter what sort of an environment you work in, solo, small firm, large firm, you've got to be able to identify and address these problems. So, not camouflage it, by the way. Bottom line, more lawyers talking about imposter syndrome is the only way to normalize it within the legal profession. Okay? If you want to really enjoy the fruits of all your labor, okay, then don't always worry about the other shoes about to drop. It's just been a facade. I know that feeling well. I've come through it. But remember those statistics, the prevalence rates. Remember those. We're emotionally detached. We think, we don't always feel. We're in an adversarial, winner take all. One lawyer's win, another lawyer's loss. The quest to win becomes paramount in our efforts to give our clients the zealous, ethical representation that we're duty bound by the rules of professional conduct to provide. But what is it doing to us? Maybe it's our own personalities and our own profession that's putting us at risk. So what are we going to do? Give yourself a chance for success. Break the silence. Don't isolate. Lawyers love to isolate. I kept away from everybody. The people who knew me the best, I did not want to see. Aside from the fact that my appearance was horrific from using alcohol and drugs every single day. I used to get dressed. I used to put a tie on and a coat and tie on to go to the liquor store because I was there first thing it opened in the morning with a briefcase in my hand, pretending I was going to work. But I'll probably be working so hard today that I won't have a chance to get it on my way home. You'll probably be closed because I'll still be working. Sure. I'd get it, turn right around and go home again. Sometimes I wouldn't even make it home. Chronic and progressive diseases. Don't isolate. Talk. Break the silence. There's a name for your feelings. Separate feelings from fact. Be a lawyer. Look at the evidence. Think of the clients you've delighted, the case you won, the deal you closed, the positive feedback, the thanks you received. They weren't an illusion. Accentuate the positive. Maybe you're a perfectionist. Okay, that means you deeply care about the quality of your work. Strive for excellence, but don't persevere over routine tasks, and give yourself a break when that mistake does happen. Have a healthy response to failure and making a mistake. Reward yourself. Give yourself a pat on the back. When you get that complimentary email or letter, hold on to it. Remember 3 little letters, yet, Y-E-T. When you feel inadequate or intimidated, add a yet on the end. I don't know how to take a deposition yet. I don't know how to file this motion yet. Put the emphasis on your development and your growth. It allows you to focus on the future. Build a strong support system. Discuss these feelings with other people. Look around. What's that mean? You think everybody knows everything? You think you're the only one who doesn't know what's going on? That the lawyer down the hall has it all together? That she knows the answer to every question? That sage advice falls from his lips whenever he opens his mouth? They may be good, but they're not perfect. Making a mistake doesn't make you a fraud. Well, you may have to fake it until you make it sometimes. But the things that are the most difficult, that have the best long-term results, are creating cultural changes, maintaining a realistic work-life balance, encourage friendships and communication and mentoring, create an environment that encourages discussing problems, stressors, not just the good stuff, but the other stuff as well. Remember, true imposters don't suffer from imposter syndrome. Remember that. Why don't we ask for help? Shame, embarrassment. What will people say if they find out Brian Quinn is in treatment for alcohol and drug addiction? I said those words. How did that happen? Well, as I mentioned, a dear friend of mine finally caught up with me, looked at me and said, Brian, what's happened? What's going on? I haven't seen you and talked to you in so long. I had been avoiding him for sure. I told him, well, I just got arrested a few months ago. He said, well, it's your first offense. Well, no, it's not. Well, no, it's not. It's my third. Your third? He said, yes. I said, it was 3 different states. He said, you know you're going to be going to jail. I said, hell, I'll worry about that. I'll figure something out. He said, what about your law license? I said, what about it? He said, you have to report these things. I said, I do? I said, well, then I guess I'll worry about that too. So this stigma of asking for help and the denial that I went through, I said, I can rationalize any of this. I'm like those other people. I told him, I can handle this. He said, well, you think you're under control, but you're not. And I'll tell you what my friend was not. He was not this person. The person who engages in what I refer to as the conspiracy of silence, that tries to lighten the normal. And that word normal is so important, folks. The normal stresses of our profession. Don't be the person that lifts the rug while somebody sweeps the problems under it, because you say to them, well, tomorrow you may be the one that has to hold it for me while I sweep all my problems away. We've got to look at them as what they are. It's okay to feel sometimes stressed by the work we do. It's part of our profession. But if we don't take care of it, that's when things don't go well. So what happened to me? Why do I always, if you ever see a program of mine, have this slide with this image of the ripple effect? Because at the center of the ripple, my friends, is a simple question. Will you let me help you? And someone said that to me, and he was on the other end of a telephone. Just a voice, not even a person that I knew. And he was with a lawyer's assistance program, because that friend of mine picked up the phone and dialed it and said, I'm calling Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers. I said, who are they? Stop. Don't call anybody. Why would they want to help me? I felt I'm not worth helping. Why would they want to do that? Who are these people? And that voice said to me, will you let us help you? And I pondered my answer. That's how impaired I was. Help me. And finally, I said, yes. And the ripple started. So don't worry. You don't have to do these things on your own. I wrote all of these. I was afraid to ask for help. What will people say? I asked. And the person at the other end of the phone said, what makes you think they don't already know? It's all of our business to get involved. We're part of a profession that impacts society every single day. Just stop for a moment and think of the impact somewhere that an impaired lawyer is having in society. The message is to never give up hope. Be grateful. Do one thing you love to do every day. Set clear and realistic goals. But most of all, don't be afraid. Let go of your fear. My name's Brian Quinn. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers of Pennsylvania, and I thank you so much for being here today. I don't know whether there are any questions, but I certainly will answer them. I'll check the chat right now.
Thank you so much, Brian, as always, for sharing your story and your insights with us. Now we can go ahead and move on to those questions. If you have questions that you haven't yet submitted, you can always click the Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. I know we're a little over time, so we'll just take a few, Brian. This first one is, how can attorneys distinguish between genuine inexperience and imposter syndrome, especially when they're early in their careers?
Well, I think that it's very inexperience. We all realize it's we all walk out of law school ready to practice law. Of course, I'm living proof of that. But it's whether or not you allow it to become the focus of your life, about that you are a fraud, that you don't deserve being there, as opposed to not, as I said, the three little letters yet. I just don't know how to do something yet. But I think it's very difficult, and I think it has to do with whether it impacts you beyond your work environment. If it starts to creep into into other aspects of your life, that you don't belong, that somehow you're a fake or a fraud, and that everything you did was lucky, and because you fit into a certain group that was given a break because you're one of them. It's not easy, but just be sensitive to it and be aware of it, and as I say, pick up the phone and make a phone call and find out. You can talk to people about it. Talk to people like me.
Thank you, Brian. Our last question is, what strategies do you recommend when imposter feelings are triggered by supervisors or colleagues who maybe reinforce that belief that you don't belong?
That is difficult, because sometimes it may be a toxic environment that you really have to remove yourself from, and that's not an easy thing to do. I understand that. That is, once again, the cultural issue, and frankly, if it's going to impact your mental health and your physical health, it's just not a good fit for you. And we get into bullying and things like that. It's becoming a problem as well. I know it sounds like a pat answer of mine, but if you only realize that these lawyer assistance programs are not for people, only for people who have hit rock bottom. They answer questions, and you can remain anonymous. You can just call them up and say, this is what's going on where I work. Is there anybody I can talk to? And they will link you up with, as I said, it could be somebody like me, or someone who's experienced it, and you talk it out. But sometimes it may involve making some very difficult career choices if it's going to start to impact your well-being.
Thank you, Brian. We actually had one more question come through, so we'll wrap up with this one. Lots of comments thanking you for your vulnerability and sharing today. And this person also asked this question: do you feel that lawyers who have gone through serious mental health issues and have survived and come back are even stronger and in some ways maybe more capable to handle stressors of daily practice? What's your kind of experience with that?
You're looking at one. Yes, I do. If I were to say, I wish a lot of things hadn't happened in my life, I'm exactly where I am now because of some of the things that happened and because of the fact that I did get through it. And it was not easy. It was extremely difficult. But I can tell you that I would never be where I am today, professionally, mentally, physically, if I hadn't learned what to do and what not to do when certain feelings approach and hit me, and it could be totally unexpected. But stress, just so you know, is the number one presenting issue among members of our profession. But I do think it's called resilience. Let's face it, and it's adverse growth through adversity, and it's part of the resilience cycle. It really it does. We actually are better off after we get through these things, and better equipped, and you'll be a better lawyer, and you'll feel like just much better inside. I do every day. This is hard for me to do, to tell this story to you. This is not easy. But I do it because I know that somewhere out there, somebody may think, I can do that too. I can feel better after I try to ask for help and just accept it.
Thank you so much, Brian. And to echo so many of our audience members' comments and sentiments, we are so grateful for your vulnerability and you sharing this information with us. It's always a pleasure to have you. And thank you to our audience members who submitted their questions and were equally as vulnerable. We really appreciate that. And if you want to take a look at any of those resources, whether it's, a support program or anything like that that Brian mentioned, as I mentioned, these slides are available for download. It has all of that information. You can access those by going to the webinar page. So thank you all so much for being here. We want to thank you for being with us at another Justia webinar. If you are interested in getting CLE credit, Justia Connect Pro does allow you to get connected with those continuing legal education opportunities. You'll also get an enhanced directory profile to help your visibility, the AI-powered Justia chat to help you boost your leads, and exclusive discounts to our Justia marketing solutions to help support your practice really holistically. And you can learn more about those at pro.justia.com. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you again, Brian, for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.